So thanks again for joining us. I know you're having a crazy busy week as usual. You're on the road a lot, aren't you?
Yes, I'm about 190 days out of
Oh
the year.
my. Maybe just before we get too far into it, maybe just give us a little bit about your background as a golf superintendent and some of the changes you've seen in turf management over the years. I know you were the the superintendent in residence at University of Guelph last year, so I'm sure you had lots to share there. But perhaps you just give us a little bit more about your background.
Sure. Graduated out of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in about '95, and pretty much I've been in the golf industry since about then. I was superintendent most recently at the California Golf Club for 15 years before accepting a position with the PGA Tour to work as a competition agronomist. And what we do is partner with host golf courses, and we work with 6 tours. We work with PGA Tour, the Champions Tour, Web.com, and then 3 accessory tours: the Latin American Tour Canada or Canadian Tour, Mackenzie Tour, and Tour China. And we provide agronomic help and assistance for those guys to help, prepare these events for tournaments. Kind of acting almost like an insurance agent for our members, which are the PGA Tour players, just to kind of keep things consistent and help get the best out of each of the golf courses as we move through the season. So with that, on the technology side of things, we just kind of started working with drones probably back in 2012, more from the photographic side of things, just trying to sell projects or show things from a different perspective that was otherwise not available to us unless somebody was going to do a very expensive helicopter flyover, which we weren't going to be able to do.
Sure.
So it really was driven out of a communication need, and I just out of pure passion for technology, I kind of gravitate towards these things.
And so, how are you using drones today?
Well, today, a lot of times, working out on the road, I have a lot of people that want to see what our golf course looks like. So for instance, if I'm out on the road, there's an initial, hey, what does the golf course look like for say, for instance, my boss? And I say, well, I just recently uploaded a flyover, the first, 9 holes. Go ahead and check for yourself. Because I can tell him the golf course looks okay, but there's a couple of things on the 4th fairway or something to that effect that you might want to take a look at yourself. One, for instance, as I was down in Leon, Mexico, and we had a golf course down there that was inundated with large patch, and we had recommended to them to make a preventative application in October and November of the prior year, and then again this January prior to an event in March. And I did the flyover of the golf course just this past, I was there maybe 3 weeks ago, and you could literally see where there was disease and no disease on the primary turf surfaces. So he treated his tees, treated his fairways and his approaches, and you could see they were absolutely clean except for the rough, which we didn't treat. So it was really, kind of a good sell for our partners that if they continue to listen to some of our advice, that we're just, we're going to be helping them all along the way.
Well, I guess the expectations are pretty high on the courses you're inspecting.
Well, it's not that it's extraordinarily high. It's just that if we can continue to move the needle for each of the golf courses, that's what we're trying to do. There are certain events, again, working with 3 different tours, not everybody has 100 guys that are going to volunteer for an event. We work with, courses that have 15 people. We work with very limited resources sometimes when we are in other countries. We work in Panama, Colombia, so you don't know what you have. But what we do have is if we can help and make the golf course better for them and educate our partners along the way, the drone ends up being a very portable and exciting tool to be able to use. Sure, there's the gee whiz factor of having a drone, but until you can start showing that it's a tool, you know, we get a lot more clout, or we get a lot more, you know, buy-in for what the information that is that we can give them.
Sure. So, I mean, I don't think you've done a lot of work with the NDVI aspect of it yet, but how do you see that being valuable for golf superintendents?
Well, you know, as far as using NDVI, you know, what we can see is, for instance, we'll highlight on irrigation landing areas for our tour players and as well as greens. And we can, during advance week, which is the week prior to the tournament, see how our dry down is affecting or working or not working. And for instance, if we had started turning off the irrigation on the Monday before the tournament, if we fly again on Thursday and we see that everything's drying down except for this area over here that's green, we can say, oh, wow, we missed a sprinkler head, or what's going on there? Is there another head that's throwing into it, or if we have a leak? So we're able to identify and to a certain degree quantify what that course looked like at that particular time of year, and hopefully try to replicate that the following year. And if you can throw irrigation sprinkler heads on it, you can start to isolate, you know, playing surfaces that matter. It really helps the playability of the golf course.
How do you see the golf industry adopting this technology down the road, 3 to 5 years from now? Is this something that's going to be important for the golf course industry?
Oh, you know, 100%. I mean, I equate it to the use of the TDR 300 or now the 350, where before it was pretty much you relied upon those guys that had a good green thumb. And we really didn't quantify and or measure a whole lot of things out on the golf course. Well, that's probably been the biggest change in the last, you know, 20 years, is that we are now collecting an inordinate amount of data that is helpful. Our science is less, you know, Johnny Greenpants, and it's now a heck of a lot more technical. And that's a big shift in how we're perceived as being professionals in the industry. So when you continue to pull more and more information, and drones themselves being utilized in that fashion, it can only help us. And with NDVI, and you know, probably its biggest use is going to be towards irrigation and water management. You know, I see the identification of watering zones being able to be quickly identifiable with a 30-minute flyover of the golf course versus having to send out 6 guys that can't probe the entire golf course to give you a picture of what the golf course is doing.
Right.
So in the future, if you have, and this is the big difference now, is that, you know, the cameras for NDVI and all the technology, it's the equivalent of when computers came out. They were super expensive, but the more and more computers that were purchased, the more and more drones are purchased, the more that the price on all this technology comes down and makes it a lot more affordable. And if we can identify these areas quicker, you know, I mean, that's just the name of the game. I mean, just being able to evaluate this golf course and make changes, you know, quick.
You're saying that change is coming. This is going to be something that, because I know, I mean, when we're out talking to golf course superintendents, I mean, and it's all new. It's all new, and they're sort of saying like, well, how do we know this is going to work for us? And I mean, what we bring to the table is we're Transport Canada certified, we're fully assured reliability, and we've got great partners that help us interpret our data. What would you say to golf superintendents who might be hesitant to go down that path?
I guess it's one of those things that if you're not growing, you're not learning. And drones and their ability to give us information, you've got to kind of start at some point. Get used to the vernacular, get used to what they can do, at least be aware, you know, I mean, and then using a service like yourselves that can kind of partner with the superintendent to educate somebody along those uses is extremely beneficial.
Terrific. Well, what I'll do now, Thomas, I'm going to open up the, I'm going to unmute everybody and open up the floor to some questions.
I have a question about the use of moisture meters. I think, David, you were alluding to that you could tie in moisture meter data to the system?
Yes, we've done that successfully with agriculture, and there's some moisture meters that we've been incorporating with some golf courses. Um, so yes, they're permanent moisture meters that are at different depths. So those are the ones that we've been discussing.
Thomas, do you see a lot of golf courses using permanent moisture meters, or is it more of a temporary item they use?
I think they're all, I think there's an intent that we'd like to have them permanent, but with battery length and stuff like that, they usually don't. I think there's also a, you know, in maybe utilizing a drone surface initially to kind of identify where good locations would be. For instance, if you see, if we were to just even take the, you know, this bent grass map that we've got going up here, if you figured that you have a green color, a pink color, and a semi-green color, if you place these sensors in those three types of spots, you can find locations that replicate that same type of moisture activity. So I think it can really help you place permanent structures or permanent meters or moisture sensors. I think there's a little bit of that you have to ground truth with what a drone is using, and you know, go out there with yourself physically and probe the ground to kind of match those up. So I think that there's definitely a need for both.
Thomas, it's Rob here. It's kind of, can you use it to predict wilt in your playability?
Well, you know, the hard part in predicting wilt is that it's usually in extremes. And because we're on so many different grass types, you know, what the color green is on Bermuda grass might be completely different than on perennial ryegrass. So I think there's a little bit of a color correction that you initially need to do. And I think where it's going to happen is that if you start putting this on a daily flight situation, the software hopefully will be able to tell you the difference from where something was yesterday to where something is today. And if they could then draw shapes on that, yeah, then I could see where you're using identifiable wilt areas.
Yeah.
What I've recommended to some folks is if you have areas where you know that you have issues, perhaps you don't have to fly the entire project, fly certain areas that are relevant for you. And that would decrease the amount of images. You know, it would basically be just what we call an agricultural watch areas. And you just fly certain spots that you know you're going to be doing some work on. But again, if we need to do a complete flyover, yes, we'll just need to budget some time there for the processing.
Yeah.
But as you can imagine, the further you go into the future, much like the computer speed, you know, you went from the 286 to the 386 to the 486 to the Pentium, things just get faster with, you know, the more people that get on board with this stuff. So it's going to happen. And ultimately where I see it happening is you fly over a golf course and you're using NDVI and ET or thermal combined together. And you basically identify, call it 6 colors. You know, you have a blue color for wet. You have a, you know, a lime green for doing, lime green for semi-wet that you would water for 50%. You have solid green that would be watering at 100%. You have a yellow that's watering at 125%. You have red, super dry, that's watering at 150%. And as the golf course flies over the entire place, it sits there and says, okay, well, how much of that sprinkler square foot is red? Well, if it's more than 50%, okay, well, then that goes into this bucket. And then it puts all the sprinklers into one category. So you're not necessarily irrigating now by fairway or tee or rough. You're watering by what its hydrozone is. And if it falls into the blue, it's not getting water. If it falls into the green, then it's getting 100%. If it falls into the red, it's going to get 150%. And ideally, the software would tell you day to day, what are the things that are changing? Well, there's only 60 sprinkler heads that are changing. Well, that's easy to send out the irrigation tech to say, hey, check out these 60 areas versus check out the 2,700 sprinkler heads.
One thing I'd like to add to that too, Rob, is that I think we had talked about that when we were out to see you, that basically this tool gets better and better as we work together. I mean, you're feeding us information based on the information we're feeding you, and the tool just gets sharpened and sharper and sharper as you go from flight to flight. And then you can identify trouble spot areas together where you pay extra attention in terms of flyovers or analysis. So it really is it's truly a partnership where we learn from you, you learn from us, and as a result, the tool gets better and better.
Thomas, would you say that there's probably an advantage to at least having a baseline set of images for each of your greens so that you know at the beginning of every year where you might be having some initial issues that you have to look at right away, and then compare that again even 2 or 3 months down the road?
Oh, I could almost see having a seasonal. I mean, there's a certain amount of, it would be great to fly it like immediately after a rainstorm so that you know what we would call field capacity or what the tank looks like when it's full. And then it would be cool to day after day fly it and create just little images of just your greens so that you could almost provide, what do they call those, histograms? That day after day you could see literally the colors change, that you could do exactly what you're talking about. That would be good.
Yeah.
I'd certainly give you a roadmap for where to check first when you go out to hand water. Tell them, well, hey, here's where all the hot spots are going to be, and before you go home on Saturday, I want you to probe with your moisture sensor these spots. If they're all good and they all read X% moisture, then you're good to go. If they read less than the baseline, you've got to water those. So you're giving him a roadmap, where before he has to kind of use his eye, and sometimes using your eye, if it's brown, well, shoot, that could be brown patch and not a wilt spot.
Do you also see that there's an opportunity there perhaps for cost savings, because it gives you the roadmap so your superintendents know we don't need to invest in pesticides on 100% of the fairways. Maybe it's just on the 1/3 that we're seeing the reds or the yellows.
I think without a doubt, and for those that are in Canada, I think it's even a greater opportunity. I mean, you guys are a little bit more on the forefront on regulations. We happen to be just the mishmash of every state is to its own kind of devices. So some states are awesome and some states are not. And I think you guys have a lot more, you have to prove that you need something. And this imagery, you can't get it any other way that I think is going to be effective.
Right.
So I think you're in the perfect opportunity to increase your credibility first, that you're being responsible, and then B, directed approach. I mean, just like David said that all of these spots can be GPS tagged. Go import that data into a GPS sprayer that's got single nozzle control. I mean, there's the next level right there.
David, you had talked a while ago about I think it was Seven Oaks, that you actually did the economics on that one with the before and after on the. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Seven Oaks was kind enough to give us a couple of their savings after we flew their golf course. The number one thing was they were going through a chemical application. They were, you're able to budget in exactly where you need to go spray. Chemicals were one of the things that they noted is they need to save some money on. As I mentioned before, the golf course was in really rough shape. They said, we need to go spray. Back of us, and I'll use this example, basically going down to the green where we have that pattern and saying, hey, we usually spray the entire thing. We're not, at this point, we're just spraying everywhere. If we can do targeted spraying the same way it's translated in agriculture, where you take a spot and you say, I need to spray more on fairway 3 or green 3 versus green 13, who's doing way better. That saves time, money, and at the same time, it saves some time for my folks up in the field. So that translates into immediately savings. Just give you guys an idea, I'm going to use the RGB from my second flight. I'm going to zoom out so you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about in the comparison. And the way it was divided is obviously taking out, working with this front side of the golf course, and then dealing with the other half. It's a 36-hole golf course. Basically, you can visually see the difference. I'm going to turn off my base map here so you guys can remove satellite. And you immediately go full screen view here. Immediately see the difference between one and the other. Again, task management was one of the key features for them. This made it to the wall. I mean, the fact that superintendent had an actual map of the golf course was a big deal for them. They went from satellite to high resolution imagery to printing this in a 24 by 36 in his office and say, this is how it looks. This is how much money we invested on this. This is how much money we need to invest on the other half.
That's great. Yeah.
Hey, David, could you possibly go to my files to El Bosque, the golf course there? And Linda, I can show you the image that we had for all this large patch. I mean, it is absolutely clear as day, the disease that's there. I don't know if you can do that, David.
Give me a second, guys. Let me see if I can pull some magic here. 1 minute.
Yeah. But literally, I mean, they spent, the problem that we had here is that we had to move this tournament up. It was typically played at the end of April. And usually by April, the large patch on the Kikuyu grass fairways had kind of cleaned itself up. Well, the tour wanted to move this event up to by 6 weeks. And we knew that they were going to be playing at a time that this large patch was going to be absolutely horrific out on this golf course. And, so we also needed proof that the spray worked. And it was a $12,000 spray to a golf course that doesn't have all the resources in the world. So for sure, we needed to have proof. And I flew it, and we've got proof now.
Up there.
Yeah, the other things that we've been able to do is I'm starting to evaluate clipping yield for greens. And, I only get an opportunity to see a golf course, for instance, like one of my golf courses in the Bahamas. I visit it once 2 months before the event, and then I visit it for anywhere from 10 to 14 days while we have the event. And then for the whole rest of the year, I'm not able to see the golf course. And it's really nice to be able to have a superintendent that has his drone that halfway through the year or quarterly can say, hey, can you fly your golf course and upload that data so I can kind of keep tracks on things? It allows me to have a relationship with that golf course and still see what's going on. And I'm able to use all the scaling tools inside Turf Solutions as far as, when I was talking about clipping yield. I want to know how many liters of grass per 100 meters squared that you have out there, but I would need to know how large all the greens are first to be able to get that number. Well, I can go in and I can get a square foot or square meter calculation on all of those. I can calculate the square feet on all the fairways. If we need to do a renovation to all the bunkers, well, how many square feet of bunkers do we have, and how much sand is that going to be? I can do that work and not be at that golf course, which is really kind of nice.
Beautiful, Bosque.
There we go. And you know what? I'll give you, probably give you, Thomas, the, let's see. We'll give you the remote control here.
Yeah, give me the other flight. There's 2 flights.
Got it.
That one. Yep.
Perfect. There you go. It's all yours.
Perfect. So right in here, and let me zoom into this. All right, getting there. It's kind of brown around that area. Leon, Mexico is just like northwest of Mexico City, and it's about 6,500 feet of elevation. Primary grass is Kikuyu grass, fairways, and bent grass greens. We're going to zoom in here pretty quick. There we go. We can also talk to them about irrigation coverage. So this is another good one for you to. All right, and here's the hole a little bit more. All right. Now, if I zoom in one more time, you can literally see all the rings on the outside of the tees right here. This is all large patch, all this stuff. And yet you look at the green at the tee itself, and it's clean as a whistle. I mean, all of that is disease just waiting to get onto those surfaces. And it's the same grass type. It's, you know, it's kikuyu grass, tees, and rough. And, you know, all I have to do is screenshot this, include this in my report, and say, thank you for spending the money to make this application. It was absolutely crucial to this. I mean, especially if we're trying to sell, you know, a television contract, they want assurances that the place is actually going to look good on television. So, and if I showed this to somebody who was in the environmental department and say, hey, look, if we didn't spray that, we would have all this large patch disease, I think they'd say, oh yeah, you proved your point.
If you're a golf course superintendent, this enables you to show your greens committee, your GM, whoever. It allows you to build your case.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, like we need this spray again. In fact, you can see how bad it is and you can see that the spray works. You might want to consider doing your green surrounds. Not necessarily the tees because they're not necessarily playable, but definitely your green surrounds.
Right.
So, and then of course there's irrigation issues as well all over this golf course.
Okay. Really appreciate your time today. That was awesome. It really gave everybody a lot of insights into how drones can help become a powerful tool on the golf course.